Hello and welcome all you fans of the worlds of fiction to another round of Grudge Match Unlimited, the show that pits the characters you've always wanted to see fight against each other in no-holds-barred action. Today's fight is between two of the most fearsome antagonists ever conceived from the world of horror. From the mind of Wes Craven and the Nightmare on Elm Street series, it's the dream demon Freddy Krueger, and from Clive Barker and the Hellraiser series, the sadomasochistic Cenobite, Pinhead. In the worlds of horror movies and the associated media, the vast majority of antagonists have taken on the form of slashers and stalkers and serial killers, unkillable killing machines that deliver untold amount of slaughter and vengeance upon the teenagers that tend to propagate those type of films. But with these two characters, we're dealing with characters who are much more powerful in terms of magic, in terms of supernatural ability, both characters who could easily be called true demons, who tend to inhabit a different universe, a different world where their powers are virtually omnipotent. And because of this, we have to make a couple considerations about how the fight would have to go down between them. In the dream realm of Freddy Krueger, as well as in the hell dimension of Pinhead, both of these characters would seem to be omnipotent and completely unkillable. So, for the purposes of this fight, we are going to pit them against each other in a sort of neutral territory where both of their powers still work. They both have full access to their offensive abilities, but both also have certain vulnerabilities, and they both have the ability to harm one another. So both have full range of their normal offensive capabilities, but neither one of them are completely unkillable as they normally appear in their movies and franchises. So taking a look at them individually first, and starting off with Freddy Krueger, first created in 1984 by Wes Craven for the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. Freddy Krueger, also known as the son of 100 maniacs because it was fabled that his mother was a nurse in a mental institution who was repeatedly raped over and over by many of the inmates at this psychiatric institution, so he was dubbed the son of 100 maniacs. And in his adult life, he became a child killer. He crafted the famed Freddy Krueger glove with the knives on the fingers, and he used this to kill several children in his hometown, and he was let off on a technicality. The police didn't collect evidence correctly, and he was set free. So the parents of the children he had killed and many of the other children around town came together and burned his house down with him inside of it. But Freddy Krueger didn't die, his spirit lived on, and he would come back in the dreams of the children of the town and kill them in their dreams, and when they died in their dreams, they would die in real life in much the same way. So if he clawed them in the chest in their dreams, their chest would rip open while they were sleeping in their bed and they would bleed to death. Freddy Krueger has had a long-running franchise, not just in movies, but he's bled over into comic books and video games and TV shows and cartoons and all kinds of different media with Freddy Krueger related fields. And he has always gotten more and more outlandish in what he does in terms of killing his victims. He has always used dreams in order to kill his victims, but because in the dream world one could pretty much do anything they can imagine, Freddy really gets very inventive with the different ways he chooses to kill people. He has taken on comic book superhero personas and killed his adversaries in that way. He's become giant monsters and eaten his opponents. He's sucked the life right out of his victims. He's turned into mechanical creatures and electrocuted his opponents. So just virtually anything he can imagine, he can turn into that in the dream and use it to kill his victims. He's incredibly inventive, incredibly imaginative, and he lives to breed fear and cause pain to all of those he can possibly get his hands on. Pinhead, from the Hellraiser series, was first created in the literary work The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker in 1986. He was not referred to as Pinhead in that book, but he was just referred to as one of the Cenobites, the creatures who would come out of the Hell dimension, and he was more expanded upon once that was turned into the Hellraiser movie in 1987, and he was actually given the name Pinhead and given his signature look with the various pins stuck in his head. But Pinhead started out his life as the British Army officer Elliot Spencer, who suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder after being involved in World War I, and went about the world seeking a hedonistic lifestyle to try to forget the problems of war. He eventually found the Hellraiser puzzle box, which is more commonly known as the Lament configuration. And once he solved and opened the box, it opened the doorway to hell, and he was taken by the Cenobites, and more specifically by the demon lord of hell, who is known as Leviathan, and he was turned into the leader of the Cenobite order. The Cenobites are mostly thought of as demons, but they are sadomasochistic creatures who live within the realm of the Lament configuration, the puzzle box hell world, and they come out whenever anybody solves the puzzle, drags them back into hell, where they will torture them and torture their souls for the rest of eternity. Now, Pinhead has a variety of mystical, magically fueled powers, much like Freddy Krueger does. He has the ability to psychically control and telekinetically control objects in the real world. Most generally, he prefers to use chains and hooks that will come out of the darkness and out of the shadows and rip his opponents apart. But he can also control a variety of other objects with his mind and telekinetic control of virtually anything he wants. He can create explosions, he can create fire, he can create illusions, get into people's heads and make them see whatever he wants them to see, all with the express intent of causing as much pain and suffering upon his victims as he possibly can. So, having taken a look at the backstories and the powers and abilities of both of these characters, it's time to determine what would happen if they were to ever collide in one-on-one competition. And the winner would be Freddy Krueger. The man of Nightmare on Elm Street, the Dream Demon, is going to take home the win of this Grudge Match Unlimited. While Pinhead does come across as an incredibly powerful and incredibly frightening individual in the Hellraiser series, it can't be forgotten that every time in every one of those movies, all of his victims and all of the protagonists of those movies are always on the defensive. They never have any powers of their own, they never have any great weapons or abilities themselves, so that makes Pinhead seem just far more dangerous, because there's no way anybody can ever really hurt or challenge him physically. Krueger, on the other hand, has had several incidences where he's been fought against. Various victims in his dream world will realize that they're dreaming and tap into the same kind of imaginative powers that Krueger uses, because in the dream world, anybody can pretty much create anything they want. So oftentimes Krueger's victims will use that same power to turn themselves into wizards or superheroes, or increase their own power level in order to fight them, and Krueger will still be able to overcome them. And of course, Freddy Krueger has managed to fight tooth and nail the incredibly powerful Jason Voorhees in Freddy vs. Jason. The only time Pinhead was ever really challenged by an opponent in any of the Hellraiser series was in Hellraiser 2, when the Shannard Cenobite challenged him and his coven of Cenobite warriors. And Pinhead was very quickly dispatched in that incident. All four of the traditional Cenobites, Pinhead, the female, Chatterer, and Butterball, were all very quickly eliminated by the Shannard Cenobite. So, anytime Pinhead has ever fought anybody on an even playing field, he's been defeated and pretty quickly dispatched. Krueger, on the other hand, has held his own and managed to defeat most of the people who have tried to fight him on an even playing field. And also, when it comes right down to it, Krueger is vastly more imaginative in the use of his abilities. Pinhead, as aforementioned, will most generally resort to psychically controlling chains and hooks in order to rip his opponents apart. But if that fails, once that attack doesn't work, he doesn't have a lot else to fall back on. Krueger, on the other hand, has tons of different ways that he's imaginatively used his powers and used his ability to create anything he can imagine in the dream world in order to defeat his opponents. So even if both of these characters are given a certain amount of vulnerability to each other, Krueger would probably more easily capitalize on the vulnerabilities of Pinhead in a variety of different ways that he could imagine and come up with. Pinhead, on the other hand, once he breaks out the chains and the hooks, if it doesn't work the first time, he may not have much he can fall back on as a secondary attack. So based on those considerations, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Wes Craven are going to take home the win of this Grudge Match Unlimited. Message me down below, let me know what you think of the outcome of this fight, and as always, any suggestions for future matches. We'll see you next time on the next edition of Grudge Match Unlimited.